Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker Podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by co-host Matt Carter, and we have a very busy Wolfpacker Podcast to update you with. Very newsy week here in the past week of college basketball, spring football starting up, and we will dive right in. But before we get too far into this episode, this podcast is brought to you in part by JFQ Lending. With interest rates below 3%, there has never been a better time to lock in a low fixed interest rate on your mortgage. You'll never need to think about refinancing again. Set it and forget it. And with JFQ Lending, you are guaranteed to get the highest level of customer service. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and over 3,000 5-star reviews. Give Gage Kistner a call today at 480-401-1681 or email Gage directly at gkistner@jfqlending.com. That's the letter G, Kistner @jfqlending.com. JFQ Lending Inc., Equal Access Lender, licensed in over 40 states, www.jfqlending.com. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, Google Play, pretty much everywhere you listen to podcasts. Plus, you can always listen to us on the Wolfpacker.com. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel while you're there and give this video a thumbs up. And of course, again, you can listen and watch this on the Wolfpacker.com. While you're on the Wolfpacker.com, use promo code 5PACK. That's the number 5PACK for a special promo deal we got going on right now. You get 1 month of premium subscription to the Wolfpacker.com. You get 4 months free. So 5 months for the price of one. That'll take you at least to the football season. You'll get all of our spring football coverage, all of our transfer coverage right now. A lot of good stuff coming up on the site. Plus, there's going to be a lot of football talk over the summer. Recruiting starting to get ramped up for the 2022 class. So there are many, many reasons why you should use that promo code number 5PACK. It's the number 5PACK. Very easy. Don't get tripped up. Head over to our website. All of our information is there, and you can click on the ads if it's easiest for you. Okay, Matt, let's jump right into the biggest news of the day. Today is Thursday, April 1st, and no, I'm not trying to play an April Fool's joke on you. I originally thought it was an April Fool's joke when I first saw it on Twitter, but as the reports kept coming and more reputable sources kept tweeting about it, talking about it, confirming the news, yes, the news is real. North Carolina basketball head coach Roy Williams is retiring after 48 seasons in college basketball. As NC State fans obviously know, Roy Williams is a Hall of Fame coach. This is a big deal, not just in the Triangle college basketball beat, but the national college basketball media. It's going to be talked about. There's going to be a big coaching search at UNC. We'll see who the Tar Heels end up getting, but for NC State purposes, this is big news because Roy Williams has really been a thorn in NC State's side ever since he came back to Chapel Hill in 2003 after he spent some time at Kansas, had some success with the Jayhawks there. But really, ever since Roy Williams has come back, NC State has not had much success against their arch-rival UNC, particularly at PNC Arena. Now, interesting note, Roy Williams' last season, NC State ends up getting a win in PNC Arena just before Christmas in a weird COVID pandemic year. But NC State fans, I'm sure, are happy about the news that Roy Williams will be retiring. There will be a new coach in Chapel Hill. So, Matt, just curious kind of what your instant reaction to this news is, what your initial thought was, and kind of what you're thinking of this in terms of, if you're a Wolfpack fan, how is this relevant to you?
Yeah, I mean, for an NC State fan, it's just simply, this is the moment you've kind of been waiting for. Now you have to wait and see what UNC does. And you can't lose sight of the fact that Coach K is probably not far behind him. I mean, obviously, I don't think he's retiring this year, but, you can probably, you could probably put on two hands, if not one hand, how many more years left Coach K has with him at Duke. He just missed his first NCAA tournament, and, who knows how long for Coach K himself. I know there was a year where he sat out that they missed the NCAA tournament, but I don't know when was the last time Coach K missed the NCAA tournament. So the light at the end of the tunnel of this kind of dreaded, double whammy, Tobacco Road, um, Coach K, and Dean Smith / Roy Williams, and they did present that opportunity you've kind of been waiting for. I still don't think that should be hindering NC State, to be blunt with you, but it's also nice that Roy hated NC State. You talk to anybody at UNC, he hated NC State, and it makes sense. When Roy grew up, it was not Duke UNC, it was UNC NC State, and the history of the Duke UNC rivalry probably, I don't know, Justin, you can probably tell me if you had the full appreciation for the fact that the Duke UNC rivalry really kind of coincided with the double whammy of NC State kind of falling off of its perch in the late 80s and then definitely in the 90s. And ESPN and Coach K coming to Durham, it was kind of a perfect storm coming together that really manufactured what was a good rivalry, a heated rivalry, into the pinnacle rivalry of college basketball. So those forces are soon to be gone. That opens a window. And so this is a big opportunity time for Kevin Keats and for NC State. And again, a lot will also have to depend on whatever UNC decides to do. So, so that's just kind of my quick thought on it.
Yeah, I mean, too quickly on your point about the rivalry, growing up in the Raleigh area, being around NC State, being around Carolina people, been to several Carolina games growing up, as I did NC State games. If you grew up in the Triangle area, NC State UNC is a big rivalry. It's talked about in the local media. It's a big deal. It's a fierce rivalry. UNC and NC State fans don't get along. From the national perspective, UNC and Duke is the big rivalry in college basketball since the early 1990s, when by the time Duke was elevating itself to a nationally recognizable program, a nationally elite program under Mike Krzyzewski. UNC has pretty much always been there as one of the blue bloods. So to me, it's just kind of looking at the blue blood perspective from the national perspective, but it's still going to be a very fierce rivalry. Roy Williams was a major character in the NC State-UNC rivalry, to your point. He hated NC State. I think, what was the quote? He'd rather beat NC State than eat, or something like that. It was one of his notorious quotes from a few years ago. So, look, he always circled the Wolfpack on the schedule. Wasn't necessarily the best of things for NC State, considering during Roy Williams' tenure, consistently, UNC had a better roster than NC State, had more talent. And when a team that's got better talent than you circles you on the schedule, then that's problematic. So we'll see who Carolina ends up getting in the coaching circle. I put out a tweet saying that UNC fans should be crossing their fingers it's Wes Miller of UNC Greensboro, and NC State and Duke fans should be hoping it's anybody else. We will see. There's going to be a lot of names out there. There's going to be a lot of hot takes. This is a sports radio host's dream day when a figure like Roy Williams retires and eventually Mike Krzyzewski will follow him. And quickly to that point, it's not just – I know we kind of have a local bias here because Duke and UNC are right down the road. Those are two rivals of NC State. They're constantly compared to NC State in the Tobacco Road Triangle area. But, there's some – legendary older head coaches in the ACC that's going to, in 5 years from now, they're not going to be here. Probably not one of them will be around. Jim Larrañaga at Miami, Jim Boeheim at Syracuse. I'm sure I'm forgetting one of them just off the top of my head. I mean, Leonard Hamilton's no spring chicken at Florida State. So, I mean, you look at those five guys, and they're all legendary head coaches in their own respect, but, five programs that are going to be looking for head coaches here in the next decade, and a possible, end of an era for the ACC and opportunities for some of the other programs in the ACC with younger head coaches like Kevin Keats at NC State, or Brad Brownell at Clemson, or Tony Bennett's a young coach at Virginia. And you have to think that maybe that's kind of the new wave of the top end ACC coaches, if you will. So we'll see. But a grand opportunity for some of the programs with younger head coaches, and an interesting new chapter in ACC basketball, as I'm sure you know. We've talked about it off air many times. You consider yourself one of the old heads. I jokingly like to say that you consider yourself older than you actually are many times, but it's a good segue into our next topic, in that the game of college basketball is changing. It is a completely different game than it was in Roy Williams' time when he got into coaching, and even when he took the job at Carolina in 2003. The transfer market is alive and well. College basketball is now experiencing what the NBA has enjoyed for the past several seasons, and free agency basically being the biggest storyline, attention grabbers of the year. There is a ton of interest in the transfer portal right now, and to make it, I guess, what the fuel to those flames is the fact that, for one, the NCAA isn't counting the last season as a year of eligibility towards an athlete's 4 years of eligibility at the college level, which means if you're a senior, you get to come back for an additional year, whereas in normal years you'd have to move on, go to the pros, or move on with your life, start a professional career in some other field. And the same applies for all the underclassmen. This year didn't count towards their eligibility, so they're still going to, if you're a freshman last season, you still have 4 years of eligibility remaining on your clock, if you will, at the college level. Combine that with the fact that the NCAA has the one-time transfer waiver, where in a normal year, unless you are a graduate transfer where you have already graduated from a school and you want to spend your last season playing elsewhere, you don't have to sit out. Otherwise, if you're an underclassman transferring to another program, you're going to have to sit out a whole season before you start playing for that new program. That is not the case this year. All bets are off. Anybody can transfer anywhere, and they can play in 2021, 2022. That means a ton of names have entered into the transfer portal. Basically, anybody out there that was unhappy with their time or unhappy with any element of their program is able to put their name in the transfer portal, and probably gets a lot of suitors if they, have a body of work that interests anybody out there on the market. And it's already impacted NC State. You saw senior guard Braxton Beverly announce that he was transferring to Eastern Kentucky. Connection there with former head coach or former Wolfpack assistant A.W. Hamilton. Beverly is from Hazard, Kentucky, so it's kind of a homecoming for him, if you will, and probably a nice destination for him to spend the last year of his college career at a school where he can probably put up some big numbers and probably steps in as their best player right off the bat. I don't know Eastern Kentucky's roster off the top of my head, but I would imagine Braxton Beverly immediately comes in as probably going to be one of their top scorers, if not their number one guy next year. Then you got freshman forward Nick Farrar, who announced his decision to enter the transfer portal. We don't know of his new destination yet, but he's gone. So 2 departures from NC State, and also 1 commitment. Providence sophomore transfer forward Greg Gant has committed to NC State, a Fayetteville, North Carolina native, a former 4-star that NC State recruited in the 2019 class. Gant played a reserve role for the Friars the past 2 seasons, hasn't put up monster numbers, but is a 6'8", 220-pound athletic big that can play the 4 position, is defensively sound, and is a guy that, maybe could really succeed in Kevin Keats' system here in Raleigh. So already 3 names on the radar in terms of transfers for the NC State program, and of course there are more out there. There's an open scholarship available after the news that Farrar is going to transfer, so NC State is still very much active in the transfer market. And if you want to check out who the major names are out there in the transfer portal that NC State is pursuing or is at least connected to, you can go to the Wolfpacker.com, use that promo code 5PACK. We have a transfer hot list, if you will, that is free, so you can go there and use it, but use that promo code 5PACK while you're there. So Matt, good segue to talking about the state of college basketball right now. I don't want to get too much into the weeds about whether it's good for the game or bad for the game. You think it's bad for the game. I love it. I think it's cool. I think it's kind of like NBA free agency, and personally, as a beat reporter on the gig, sitting here in April, we're past the basketball season. I love following it, writing about it, and there's obviously a lot of interest from the fans. But let's talk about what's happened so far as it relates to NC State. You got Beverly and you got Farrar going out, and then you got Gant coming in. What do you think about those moves, and then what do you think about what NC State can do with that remaining scholarship? And again, it's not over yet. There could be more on the way, whether it be players coming in or players departing the program.
All right, well, let me first start with what you brought up a while ago on the good or bad. You said it's like NBA free agency. I would point out, and the NBA ratings stink right now. So, I'm just saying. So it may be interesting in the off season. Is it going to be interesting when it counts? Which is when you get the eyeball. And I know ratings are down all over the place. I get that. I'm not one of those that just point to ratings and say, oh, ratings are down. See, because they're down everywhere. But it's relative. And the ratings to NBA, even relative, are not good. And we just had, there's a good website called Sports Media Watch that covers sports TV ratings, and they've been doing it for 15 years. And their 15 years of covering it, the Elite Eight with the worst ratings in 15 years of their coverage of sports TV ratings. Not some interesting dynamics to that, it being on a Monday, Tuesday versus the traditional Saturday, Sunday, et cetera, but the ratings are down. And so it's fun off-season chatter. I get it. Don't get me wrong. It's not healthy for the actual season, for the actual action, which is where the sport makes its money and where the sport is driven in popularity. And so I do not think it's healthy in that regard. And I think it's backed up by the lack of eyeballs, not just being blunt. So that said, it is fascinating to follow. It is another form of recruiting, and recruiting has always been fascinating. And in terms of the move, I apologize for the background noise.
Oh, no, you're good. It's an opportunity for me to cut you off and say, look, we're not going to get down this debate. Matt, I let it off by saying we're not going to go down this rabbit hole. This is not going to turn into a debate whether or not the transfer waiver is good or bad. But I will say this. You bring up the NBA. Ratings might be down. They're down across the board. However, I think the NBA is just fine, considering you just take one look over at that Top Shot market that the NBA's got going on. You got dudes out there, or women, or whoever, the buyers out there are spending 4, 5, and 6 figure totals on highlights. They're spending this money
I'm talking
on
about that. Yeah, I'm talking
highlights. They're doing just fine. So
the NBA has the most marketable stars because it's the most marketable sport. The sport itself. In fact, there's a good story about how they're going to ask for X amount of billions of dollars in their newest contract, and where Sports Media Watch was saying they're crazy if they think they're going to get that much. So I'm just talking. They got the. It's fine for the stars. It's fine for the individuals. I'm talking about the game. And that's where the issue comes up. Let me say, though, it's right for the players. And I do believe college athletics, if you're going to play by this amateurism model, you need to do what's right for the players. And for the players, it's right for them to be allowed to transfer just like a regular student. I might throw in a reasonable, emphasis on the word reasonable, academic stipulation. I'm not asking for dean's list student, because look, the time demands on these kids are off the charts. It's not reasonable to expect them to be both dean's list students and spending tens of hours a week on their craft. So that's not realistic. But a reasonable, modest academic stipulation to kind of get you over a waiver on a transfer, I'm all for it. But I don't think it's healthy for a game, and I'm pretty sure that's probably why Roy Williams is one of the reasons why him and Lon Kruger and John Beeline before that were stepping out. As for NC State specific move, though, Greg Gant is very interesting. I know you talked to a guy, Jamie Shaw, a buddy, friend of the podcast, and kind of got the perspective on why he was a borderline top 50 prospect coming out of high school. I talked to a beat writer for a story coming about his time at Providence. The gist is we're going to find out whether or not this was just simply a bad fit at Providence. I will add that the young man, unfortunately, had some tough times at Providence. He was very, by all accounts, and from my interactions with him, he was really close to his mother. And we actually talked about, I lost my father 5 years ago. So I told him I kind of understood, and he said, yeah. And he told me, I don't wish that pain on anyone. So obviously, the loss of his mother his freshman year really, we understand it occupied his mindset. His friend, I'm not sure basketball was first on his mind. And then you have a kid from Fayetteville all the way up in Rhode Island loses his mother.
Yep.
And then he got hit with COVID. Not him personally, but college basketball got hit with COVID. And last year just wasn't fun for a lot of college basketball people. Players, coaches, the whole nine, even beat writers. It wasn't as fun as it normally is. So, I think he said, I just want a normal college experience. He was looking for a fresh start. So I think the combination of hopefully this will be a better fit for him. He'll be in a better mindset, maybe have more fun more than anything, that will kind of bring out the best of Greg Gant. Because there's a reason why he was a top 50 player coming out of high school. And I do think he's a good fit for what NC State needs. I think NC State needed a power forward, which is what I think Greg Gant really is in the NC State system. But that power forward with athleticism, the ability to occasionally shoot. He made some threes. He's not a prolific three-point shooter by any stretch, but he can make a jumper. Who can defend multiple spots on the floor. So the question is the talent, can it be maximized? Can a new look, a new style, a new start bring out the best in Greg Gant? But I understood the move, and it's intriguing. I think that's the best way to put it. Intriguing.
Yeah, and Greg Gant gives another humbling reminder out there for, all of us, beat writers, fans, anybody that's, close spectator of the sport of college basketball or any college athletics, that, we look at this as entertainment. This is entertainment to many. College sports, even more so than the pros, bring out, pride and emotions and alma mater, all the feel-good feelings and some of the bad feelings that come along with rooting for a college athletics program. But we have to remind ourselves that these are, college-age kids, and you don't know their stories. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So you have to be really careful about, how you talk about some of these kids, how you criticize some of these kids, because, an athlete's performance on the court or on the field on any given day or any given week, that's just what we see on TV. But we're not there in the locker room. We're not there with the kid 24/7, knowing what's going on behind closed doors. And that can come back to the NC State program too. I mean, this has been a tough year for everyone, and I know we're all tired of talking about it, and I know that there's light at the end of the tunnel and everybody's getting vaccinated. I just got my first shot. Happy about it. I'm thrilled. Got to play my first game of pickup basketball last week, and it was awesome in over a year. But with all that said, and I don't want to go on too much of a rant about it, but it gives you a nice reminder that, we can criticize the play, but let's be fair with our criticism and not direct it towards personalities of people, because these are human beings. These are good kids there's no doubt they're always going to try their best when they're out there. They are Division I athletes. They are competitive people, and they are always going to give it their all. But about Greg Gant's, status on the team, I agree with you. I think it's interesting. Look, his numbers don't necessarily wow you off the page. I think he averaged about 4 a game and 20 minutes per game, off the bench for a Providence team that frankly wasn't very good in the Big East last year. But with that said, you can't teach 6'8", you can't teach 220. The body, the size, the athleticism is all there. let's see what the NC State staff can do with his jump shot. Let's see if he can, have a better system fit, if you will. Seems like a guy that could be great in transition, an athlete that can guard multiple positions. That's exactly what Kevin Keatts wants in a guy on his team. I think he's a guy that can come in and can make an immediate impact. I don't know, what his time will be. I don't know if he's a guy that's going to contend for a starting gig or not. There's too many questions at this point in time with, more and more roster developments probably to come to really get a clear picture. But I think it's a solid pickup for NC State, a guy that was ranked number 55 overall in the 2019 class, and there was already, a personal connection there with NC State, considering Kevin Keatts recruited him out of high school, and now he's going to join Manny Bates, a fellow Fayetteville native, in the front court. So a little bit cool story there, and there's a lot of North Carolina talent on this NC State roster. So we will see what the future holds for Greg Gant. Again, I already referenced there's a lot of names out there. I know one that's exciting a lot of people is the ECU transfer, Jaden Gardner, a forward that was a two-time All-American Conference player. He led the the American Athletic Conference in scoring in 2019-20, was second in the league in scoring last season. Star power coming from ECU. NC State is in the running for him. I know there's a handful of schools that are interested in him. He's got a lot of suitors. Virginia's in play. Oklahoma State's in play. Tennessee's in play. And there's a lot of good players out there available on the transfer portal. So be sure to check out that story on the Wolfpacker.com. I know it's been doing really well, but guys, go check it out. Go ahead.
I think the guard will be really where we probably should focus most, going forward. And I know there was, in that story you were talking about, Noah Locke is a name that very prominently mentioned.
Yep.
From Florida. He's having a virtual meeting with Kevin Keatts at some point. I suspect that will be, if you're looking at where, because they do have an extra scholarship available now, if you're looking at where that might best be fit, you're looking at, can they get another shooter in the backcourt with the loss of Beverly, the uncertainty of what Devin Daniels would do with his quote-unquote super senior year. You do have some kids coming in, obviously, Breon Pass to Quavion Smith. But another option can't be a bad option. It can't be bad.
And if we're talking about guards, another intriguing name out there is Christian Lander, an Indiana transfer guard who was a freshman last season, played limited minutes, but was the number 26 overall prospect in the 2020 class, the number 7 point guard, according to Rivals. He was a 5-star guy that skipped his senior year of high school to go play for the Hoosiers last season. Again, didn't play much, so not a lot of tape on this kid. You don't really know how it's going to translate to the college game, but whenever you see a 5-star talent pop up, it's going to raise eyebrows and it's going to get attention from Power 5 schools. So, again, a lot of good names out there. Go check out our article on thewolfpacker.com if you want to read the full list. And again, there's one scholarship open right now, but that's the case right now. We don't know. There could be more transfers on the way. That could open up more scholarships. It would make the pursuit of other transfers very interesting. So more on this to come in the coming weeks. A great reason to use that promo code 5PACK on the Wolfpacker.com. Take advantage of that 1-for-5 deal. You get 1 month for $10, gets you 4 months free. That'll take you well through the summer leading up to football, which gives me a great transition, Matt, to start talking about spring football. We were able to talk to NC State head coach Dave Dorn earlier this week for NC State's 2021 Pro Day. We also talked to Aleem McNeil, Joe Sculthorpe, Kerry Angeline, the 3 guys that were participants in NC State's 2021 Pro Day. I don't want to focus too much on Pro Day because we know, Aleem's going to be a draft pick that probably goes at the very minimum first 3 rounds, could even sneak up to a second round, maybe even a late first round, who knows. We'll of course be keeping track of that on the Wolfpacker.com. The other 2 guys are going to get an opportunity in the NFL. We'll see what the future holds for them. But let's talk about spring football because we've got the spring football game coming up next Saturday. That'll be April 10th at 1 p.m. in Carter Finley Stadium. It's going to be open to fans. I know there's a limited capacity, but I don't think that should come too into play for a spring game. But look, if you're in the Raleigh area, you're really interested in going, you'll probably be able to get to the spring football game. So hopefully, fingers crossed, good weather on that April weekend. It'll be Masters weekend, and you can get out there and watch the Wolfpack. I'm sure it'll be a nice change-up and, again, hopefully good weather. But let's talk about, what we should be looking for in this spring game. Obviously, the number one topic coming into spring practice is Devin Leary, NC State starting quarterback last season that suffered a leg break, season-ending injury last season against Duke. He missed the rest of the year, underwent surgery, rehabbing. He's back in practice now. He's throwing the ball. Dave Doran says he's looking good in terms of his rehab process, although he had some critical words about one of his scrimmages, so maybe a little bit of fuel to his fire to see how he could maybe perform in the spring game. Let's start with the quarterback conversation. Devin Leary back in action. It's good to see him out there in pads and a helmet throwing the ball. That's got to be the number one thing you should be excited about if you're an NC State football fan leading into 2021 with a ton of returning talent coming back.
Yeah, I mean, you just want to see how he responds. But I got to imagine I've never broken a leg, so much less broken a leg in a football game while being tackled. Well, not tackled, slide him. I think the key is, and I don't know how much of an answer we'll get with this in spring, but that first hit, that first slide, the first physical contact from an opposing team, how does he handle that? Not even, and more than that, how does he handle pressure when there's a potential hit coming? How does he handle that? The mental aspect of it, in addition to the full physical recovery, which from all accounts, the fact that he's been cleared to play in spring, you have to assume that there's been a complete and total full recovery of the leg. So, I don't know how much we'll get out of the spring game when it comes to Devin Leary, but I do think that the biggest story is he's back. He's been back. He doesn't appear to have any setbacks. He's obviously not going to get tackled in the spring game, whatever version it looks like or it takes. They're not going to hit him. But I think you're right. I think that the big story is he's back, and we know there's a clear pecking order this year. I mean, hadn't had that the last few years of Devin Leary, Ben Finley, and McLaughlin. We know the pecking order. There's some stability. They're getting an entire spring practice with Tim Beck that they did not have last year, so they should be much further ahead in offense and then development of the offense and knowledge of the schemes. So, I think that's kind of where it is right now.
And to be fair, there was a clear pecking order going into the 2020 season. Devin Leary was supposed to be that day one starter, and it just followed suit of the crazy COVID 2020 season. The fact that Devin Leary had to be in quarantine for 17 days leading up to that season opener last season against Wake Forest. Bailey Hockman was the surprise starter last season. He ended up playing a lot of reps. Hopefully there won't be as much volatility in terms of availability of these players. Hopefully the COVID cases are, by that point, are well lower than they were last fall, and it's not going to impact too many games. So fingers crossed there. Should be a return to normalcy. Let's just maybe take a look at both sides of the ball, maybe name one thing each that we're looking forward to in the spring game on each side of the ball. We'll start with the offense, and I'll start with my perspective. I'm really interested to see this wide receiver rotation that NC State's got, because they basically got all of their returning production coming back with senior Emeka Emezi announcing his return. You got Thayer Thomas, Devin Carter, Porter Rooks, all coming back as contributors. CJ Riley is a guy that Dave Doran said is returning to the quote-unquote normal CJ Riley that NC State fans have come to love and respect. He was returning from his second ACL tear last year and didn't necessarily have the best of stats, although I thought he played pretty well in the Gator Bowl. But nonetheless, it'd be nice to see him kind of return to normal in terms of his health. But you look at all that veteran talent, the returning talent there, and then you look at some of the younger guys, not just last year's class, but also the incoming 2021 class of wide receiver talent. You know, guys like Anthony Smith or Josh Crabtree. You know, it's there's a lot of talent at that wide receiver position. I'm interested to see how it's juggled, if there's going to be a lean to the veteran experience, or if they want to get some of these speedy young receivers out there on the field. And the spring game is the perfect opportunity to do that. So, Matt, what's one thing you're watching for on the offensive side of the ball?
Probably more so the front of the offensive line. A little bit the running backs in the spring game, because we know Bam Knight and Ricky Person are not participating. So kind of get a good look at some of the other running backs that we did not see as much as in 2020. We know Jordan Houston capable. He had a very nice 2019 season. It didn't translate as much into 2020. But you know, what do we see out of a Delbert Mims or the now former walk-on DeMarcus Jones? And because running back is a position that it tends to be hit hard with injuries more than any other group. But I'm kind of curious to see how the offensive line shakes out, because there's a lot of combinations. I know that the combination we see Saturday in the spring game doesn't mean that's the combination you're going to see in the fall. And there's a big addition coming in Chandler Javala, D2 All-American, who's not here for the spring, but will be in the fall. So, you know, Dave Dorn singled out Derek Eason, said he was the most improved. He can play guard and tackle. You know, Bryson Speeds can play guard and tackle. You got Tyrone Riley back for his 7th year. So he's a super senior at this point. Yeah, you got your mainstays. You got the Grant Gibson. You got the Ike Ekwonu. And Dylan McMahon was making nice progression last year at right guard. So I'm curious to see what kind of combinations they come up with, what it looks like, and how it shakes out at the end of the spring, knowing that there's more experimenting and competition to come in the fall.
Yeah, I'm also interested to see what they do with Trent Penix. I know he's a guy that they want to get more involved in the offense, technically in the running back rotation, but they've mentioned that they're going to, you know, mess around with kind of his role on the offense, and Dave Dorn even compared him to, you know, maybe playing like a similar type of role as a Jalen Samuels, kind of a Swiss Army knife where he can do a lot of different things in that NC State backfield. So really interested to see what they can do with Trent Penix, because clearly he's a guy that has the physical assets and the tools, and has a guy that's been a really hard worker in this NC State program the past 3 years. So it'll be good to see him get some opportunities out on the field if he continues his progress this offseason. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball. Matt, you got one area that maybe you're looking at specifically leading to the spring game. Since I started with the offense, I'll let you start this time on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think secondary for me. I think the most competition we've seen in the secondary. You got the 2 transfers from Florida State. You got Cyrus Fagan, and from Marshall, you have, I think it's pronounced Derek Pitts. It's how Dave. I thought it was Derek Pitts, but it might be Derek Pitts from Marshall. Before that, West Virginia. You got all these guys back: Shaheem Battle, Cecil Powell, Aiden White at corner. You're throwing in Pitts in there. You got the guys at safety: Tanner Engel, Jakeem Harris. Now you're throwing in Cyrus Fagan in there. You got other guys that play. Obviously, Tyler Baker-Williams is back at nickel. You got guys like Devin Boykin and Joshua Pierre-Louis, who got valuable reps during their true freshman year that can play multiple spots in the secondary. So I just think you got a lot of competition in the secondary. Even though you got guys back that started an awful lot, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're set in stone to start again in 2021. So I'm very curious to see what some of those combinations look like in the secondary.
Yeah, I mean, I would say secondary is definitely an area that everyone's going to be watching on the defensive side of the ball, but I'm going to move my attention to the line. I think we kind of know what the linebacker core is looking like. It's going to be strong, spoiler alert, with a potential preseason Defensive Player of the Year in Peyton Wilson, a guy that led the ACC in tackles last season, headlining the linebacker corps. But defensive line, you lose Aleem McNeil to the draft. He's your biggest pro prospect from 2020. He played a bulk of the snaps at the nose position last season. He'll be a big loss, obviously, but NC State's basically got everybody else coming back, and you've got a couple of edge rushers that seem to solidify themselves on that top line, with Daniel Joseph deciding to return, the Penn State transfer that led the team in sacks last season, or at least led the defensive line, because Peyton Wilson was right up there with him. I know he led the defensive line in tackles for loss as well. Then you got Terrell Dawkins, the redshirt freshman from last season, that'll be playing his second year, solidifying his role on the line. He was a nice young pass rusher that really showed some flashes last season. I like the edge rushing potential of this NC State D line. And then you got C.J. Clark, a guy that, we gave a lot of attention to Aleem McNeil at the nose position, but C.J. Clark played a fair amount of snaps last year that were pretty comparable to Aleem McNeil. Now, I know Aleem was, graded as high as anybody on this team, heck, even at the Power 5 level, according to Pro Football Focus. But C.J. Clark, a guy that, can he take that first line type of role as that anchor of the defensive line, and a lot of other interesting pieces on the defensive line as well. You got Joshua Harris, a guy that clearly is a big guy. I know they wanted to get his conditioning to a level where they felt comfortable playing him more reps last season. He kind of played that goal line role, if you will, when they wanted to throw in another defensive tackle, have a heavy package in goal line situations. NC State had some success in those types of situations last season. And Davin Vann, what can they do with Davin Vann, a highly touted defensive line prospect from the 2020 class? He got some limited snaps last season, but it's really tough to make your presence known as a true freshman on either side of the lines. But he's a guy that I know this coaching staff is really excited about, a guy that could be versatile playing that nose position, can play tackle, and can even line up on the edge as well. So really interested to see what his role can be, and if some of the other younger guys step up and solidify their roles. They'll all get their snaps in spring games. That's why I'm really looking forward to seeing what that D line can present.
Yeah, and Savion Jackson was the guy that Dave Doran really singled out. The guy kind of turning it loose. So I kind of agree with you. I'm very curious to see what Savion looks like. He was so highly touted coming out of high school. And so, Dave said he's a pleaser. He's a guy who kept worrying about making mistakes, and now he seems to be turning it loose. So definitely an interesting name to watch there.
I'm excited. This is going to be a fun football season to cover for the Wolfpack. A lot of promise coming back from a successful 2020 season, a nice turnaround year. Let's see if NC State can continue its growth, and I think we'll learn a lot from the spring game. It's not going to be a tell-all, as you've mentioned, but it'll be nice to see, the byproduct of this NC State team able to have an actual spring practice session this year, as opposed to last year where it was completely impacted by COVID. This is the time of year last year where everybody was huddling inside their apartments and dorms and, signing on to Zoom meetings as opposed to actually working out and being together in person. So we'll see what that does, and we'll see what that produces in this upcoming fall, and hopefully a more normal college football season. But that should about do it for this podcast. We covered some basketball, we covered some football. So again, pleasant reminder for you folks listening to us or watching us on YouTube, please use that promo code number 5 PACK. That's 5 PACK, the number 5 PACK. Very simple. Go to our website. There will be many options for you to just press a button. It'll take you right to the landing page where you can use that promo code, and you just 1 month, $10, then you get 4 free. That's 5 months total. That'll take you well through the summer. You can check out all of our premium content, news, and analysis at thewolfpacker.com. And again, a lot of transfer developments coming, a lot of football stories coming, so definitely a great time to take advantage of that deal. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, Google Play, everywhere you listen to podcasts. Plus, you can always listen to us on thewolfpacker.com. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. While you're there, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up. Follow us on social media. You can follow our main account at the Wolfpacker on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Justin H. Will, and give us a like on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack, on thewolfpacker.com. So for Matt Carter, this is Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Podcast.